it's a point that goes out in a straight line at multiples of the speed of light. It disrupts interstellar communications and transport. So it was a bit like kicking a hornet's nest, right? Because not that they were hostile towards us, but they were concerned, like, what is going on in this little corner of the cosmos? So that was the whole modern era of these, although they've been seen for thousands of years. But once we got to the nuclear threshold, we crossed the Rubicon here. All right, a red line went over. And so this is why they're seen all over the place. You know, nuclear installations, nuclear ships that are carrying, or big carriers that have nuclear weapons on them. Yeah, I know many officers who had these craft around them checking that out. Even nuclear power plants. So there's a big danger with that nuclear system and how it pertains to not only the future of the Earth, which they have an interest in, these civilizations, the ET ones, but they also are concerned about what happens when a civilization at our level of social and spiritual development, which ain't great, has these kind of technologies and start going out into space. So it coincided shortly within 10, 15 years of detonating the first atomic bomb in 1945. By 1957, the Soviets had put Sputnik up. Right. And so they knew that we were going to be outward looking going into space.
Why do you think these beings are invested in the future of the Earth? If they're not from here and they're from another, like if we found another Earth, if we found another planet inhabitable with life, we'd be way more advanced than they were.
Right.
Why would we want to protect them from themselves?
Well, I think that what I've found is people evolve. I mean, let's just say, whether you want to call it spiritual or socially, psychologically, you develop compassion, develop empathy, develop a longer range vision than the next quarterly report, right? In other words, you have a view. So you get taken on a long range view. And I think that civilizations, some of them may have come our way before and faced near extinction level events. Or they've seen other civilizations come and go that have, blown themselves up or become a problem.
Right.
So I think there's a big, let's call it cosmic institutional memory out there. And there's nothing new under the suns. This probably happened before. But I also think they see the goodness in humanity, the capacity for creativity, for exploration, for intelligence, even very high levels of spiritual consciousness. So it's not as if they view us all as so dimly. I think they see the promise, but they see right now this little window of time in the last 100 years or so, where we're, on the one hand, technologically advanced enough to destroy ourselves, and I'll get to this in a moment, potentially threaten other worlds with technologies that we've developed from reverse engineering extraterrestrial transport systems. But we're also not socially and spiritually evolved enough to not explore some of the range. So that is exactly the sweet spot, or let's call it the dangerous spot of where a civilization could go sideways very badly.
Right.
All right. And we're there. We've been there since, the mid 20th century.
Do you think there's any chance that these things or what do you make of the theory that these are future humans?
Well, I think there have been some encounters that are our descendants from the future. So I think we have to be careful here. I think of let's say a species evolves for 500,000 years and becomes spacefaring. Evolution doesn't stand still. And so they could evolve to something that would look like a non-human being, an extraterrestrial being, but have been descended, but 20,000 generations ago, right? And certainly that's possible. I think that's probably what happened in Rendlesham Forest empires.
You mean 20,000 generations in the future?
Yes, from 500,000 years in the future. Right. And from some of the military guys who were there where this object landed in early 80s in England, there's pretty good indication that there was some contact that happened. It was psionic, telepathic, that they were us from 500,000 years in the future. And it was a pyramid-shaped onyx-looking like black onyx-looking object. Very well documented case. But eventually the Ministry of Defense in the United Kingdom, I went over there and met with them back in '93, and shortly after that they did declassify some of their information on it. So my understanding that might have been, but still, they, in a sense, they were extraterrestrial, but they weren't from this, particular time space. So it gets into how you define that. But my understanding is, if one of our whistleblowers who's passed away, Sergeant Stone, he was on a retrieval team, crash retrieval, dealing with this in the 60s. And by late 60s, he said there were 69 specific non-human extraterrestrial species that they had cataloged.
69? When you think...
Yeah, and I'm sure it's way more than that now. So that, and his information, before he passed away, we got his archive that's in our archive, and also we had a very extensive interview with him. And so there are many people like that who come forward and have told similar accounts. Now, one of the problems is if you're in a compartment operation like that, you're not going to be read into or briefed on something of very similar nature that's in a different base or another compartment operation. It's
right.
Very, very compartmentalized is what they call it. So what I've tried to do is to see where it syncs up. So let's say you have 10 people who've been on crash retrieval teams that I've debriefed. That's probably more than that. Where were they? What did they see? What was their methodology? And how much of that is congruent? And when you get congruence from people who don't know who each other are, so I'm sort of, my project, the disclosure project, has been the clearinghouse for hundreds of these guys. Then you begin to be able to find out where the sweet spot of truth is, and try to build out this picture. So that's what we've tried to do. It's been painstaking.
Mm-hmm. When it comes to the 69 different variations of non-human life that this gentleman cataloged, the idea of the future humans thing is interesting to me when it comes to these beings, these short little gray alien beings with 2 legs and 2 arms. Because if you think about how rare we are on Homo sapiens on planet Earth, there's like over 2 million cataloged species of animals on planet Earth. Out of those 2 million, there's 20 hominids. Out of the 20 hominids, only one of them figured out how to develop technology off the planet. So we are super rare on this planet alone. So now you want to extrapolate out into the universe and find all the other Goldilocks planets that are able to inhabit life. They have different oxygen levels, different gravity. Most of them are water worlds, very different atmospheres. What are the chances they're also going to evolve? That something like us is going to evolve bipedal, upright walking, 2 arms, 2 legs, and a head that sits, brain sits directly on top of the head.
It's very high, and here's why.
It's a high probability that would happen?
Yes, and if you look at the work of Sheldrake at Oxford, morphogenic field propagation, because of quantum entanglement, let me explain to the audience what that means. Quantum entanglement is at that level of quantum physics where every point of space and time is interconnected. Now, the ultimate quantum entangled field is mind, or consciousness, which we can get into this. This gets into the deep end of the pond very quickly. But when let's say something works in one area, and it becomes something that is within that morphogenic field at a quantum entangled level, it spontaneously begins to pop up elsewhere. And this is known as field propagation through quantum entanglement. So it would make total sense that that is the case. Now, there's certainly a huge variety amongst that, say, within that template. And there may be other forms as well. But I think that form was called, the form of a universal person, a head, 2 arms, 2 legs, is probably pretty consistent. Now, there may be others. And they may have evolved from, like, we're 98% identical to chimps. So, take a look. I mean, some of us more than others. One of my best friends calls me a big A because I'm muscly and furry. So we just go, okay, that's us, right? But there could be a species that evolved from the equivalent of a cetacean or a dolphin or a bird-like or what have you.
Right.
So I think there's a huge amount of variation in the cosmos. But it's not that surprising that there would be this morphogenic field propagation. Some people call it the 100th monkey effect, where they studied monkeys on an isolated island, and once the troop learned how to do a skill,
Right.
spontaneously hundreds of miles away, the monkeys on another island started doing it.
Yeah,
But it was like this entangled field.
Right, I understand what you're saying. You're talking more about consciousness, but I'm talking like hard
physics.
biology.
I am too, but you're acting like those are separate. They're not. So this
How are they not separate? Like I'm saying, like how is it if physically on a planet, if the gravity is different, if the atmosphere is different, if there's no land, if it's all ocean?
But that's external. So I'm talking about the internal. See, here's the thing that's very interesting. We're different in every imaginable way, but we're the same in a very essential way, and that they're sentient, conscious. So let's talk about field consciousness and what Erwin Schrödinger, the father of modern particle wave theory and quantum physics, in 1908 said the total number of minds in the universe is one. That is, it is a singularity. So I know it sounds very Spockian, but this is a fact, actually. It's been proven.
Very Jungian.
Yeah. It's been proven by Dr. John at Princeton University, who had the Princeton Engineering Anomalies Research Lab. And I knew him before he passed away. And they did very accurate studies with random number generators, where you would just think to it, and it would change it from just equal distribution of zeros and ones to shifting to, say, ones. Digital. They're just quantum digital random number generators. Very well done studies, and they're replicated all over the world. So what is that? So we always think of ourselves as sort of these islands that are completely separate because of 3D, right? Our bodies, the environment. Right. But what if there's a level of not only in physics, physically, what they call quantum entanglement, and Einstein called it the spooky effect, but also on a level of consciousness and mind? It explains a lot of phenomena, great deal of the phenomena. So the one good thing, before I went to medical school, you're going to laugh, it's such an anachronism now, I became a meditation teacher and studied Sanskrit and the Vedas, and sort of learned really in depth about the science of consciousness and all of that.
You're a hippie.
When I was 19, 20, it was great fun. Yeah, it was a sort of, I finished college when I first went in, and I said, what am I going to do now? So I said, well, let's do this. So that was a consequence of a contact experience I had. And then that was a consequence of having had a near-death experience when I was 17. So it sort of opened up that trajectory into consciousness and the study of that. And then where does that intersect with all this? Well, it's actually, it turns out to be essential. So, you have this team of people who just defected from, I can't say which black sites, I've been at those black sites, and they were using a type of psionic or psychic interface with technology to intercept and bring craft in and then hit them with electromagnetic pulse weapons.
Right.
I've been at these sites. I know where they are. And I've met some of the operators. And it's real. I mean, it sounds like science fiction.
No, it sounds like Stranger Things in real life.
Well, I mean, everything. I mean, the science fiction is all ripped out of the things that are real often. But this is the real end of it, and it's serious. But that's why the CIA had a remote viewing program. 30 years on, I know a lot of those original remote viewing guys. And so that whole area, where does that have to do with UFOs, though? Well, it has to do with the fact. Now, I wrote about this in a 1991 paper called The Comprehensive Assessment of the UFO ETI Subject, Extraterrestrial Intelligence Subject. And it describes two related phenomena. That those civilizations have technology that assists their consciousness in these capabilities. But they also have the ability to have their consciousness augment the technology so they can think to that camera. It's like Neuralink without the wires, and at the speed of thought rather than the speed of electromagnetic field propagation. Yeah. So, and that's real. And so civilizations that, if they're, from the Andromeda galaxy, right? 2.5 million light years. They're not using your cell phone at the speed of light. It would take 2.5 million years to say, hey, how you doing?
Right.
And another 2.5 million years for you to return the reply.
Right.
So the speed of light ain't going to cut it. So when you go what I call superluminal, beyond the speed of light, you're going into trans-dimensional. You're crossing dimensions. And within those finer dimensions, it becomes more and more preeminent that you're using conscious fields and thought. And it's really strange stuff, but it's true. And so if you don't understand that, you're never going to understand extraterrestrial civilizations.
How much faster is this conscious superluminal?
Instant. So
It's instant.
It's instant. Now, not necessarily in transport systems, but if you're communicating, it's in real time. Because there too, let's say you're here and your home base is 2.5 million light years away. It's because it's not going in a straight line. Forget about the speed of light. Think again about this interrelated quantum entangled cosmos,
Right.
at the level of not only thought and consciousness, but even very refined electromagnetic systems. So then you go, boom, it's in real time. And this is where they've done studies recently where they have teleported particles, and they have what the spooky effect, where the same particle can be in two places at once that Einstein described. So I'm boring your audience at this point, but
no, you're not boring.
But so at that point, you begin to realize that if you're a very advanced civilization and you want to become interstellar, you're not going to be using the junk that all of us think is so all get out from Silicon Valley. I mean, that's rubbish, right?
How did you figure this out? This stuff, the superluminal consciousness communication.
Well, the truth.
I prefer the truth.
You know. Well, this is a bit of a long story, but anyway, in 1973 in March, I got very sick and I died. I had a near-death experience. Okay. I was raised an atheist and we didn't believe in anything. If it didn't fit in a test tube, it didn't exist. Nonsense. But I had this amazing, beautiful experience, actually. And I had personally this experience of my own, say, drop of my individuality become the ocean, or this expanded consciousness state that was infinite. It was boundless. It was very beautiful. And obviously, I didn't die, because here I am. But it was a very serious near-death experience. And about 6 months later, a couple months later, I decided I'm going to learn meditation, because I don't want to get back to that state without getting sick and dying. Mm-hmm. So I learned how to meditate and started studying that. And then I was up on a mountain in North Carolina, up outside the little town of Boone, North Carolina. Mm-hmm. And I was hiked up there before sunset. And I wanted to see the sunset and meditate. That was it. And just before sunset, I saw a perfectly seamless disc that appeared. And I'd seen almost an identical one when I was 8 or 9 in North Carolina. I grew up in the Charlotte area. And I went, oh, they're back. I didn't think anything more about it. I said, well, I just accepted this. Okay. Because I looked into this when I was a kid after I had my sight. But that's all that happened. It was there, and it didn't move off. It just winked out. This sort of like dematerialized or vanished. Right. So I go and I meditate. I'm sitting there, and it gets dark. And when I open my eyes, I have this. The whole Milky Way is up above. I'm at over 5,000 feet up there, crystal clear, October 1973. And I had this beautiful thought that entered me. I said, behold, what a beautiful universe God has made. And with that, I went into that same experience I had when I died. It was phenomenal, but I was in my body. So I looked over, and there was a glow over the edge of the hill mountainside. I think it was that craft, and there was a person. Now, as an 18-year-old kid, I thought it was a deer standing on its hind legs. Had beautiful eyes, maybe about 4.5, 5 feet tall. I came over and it touched my right shoulder, and I left. I just dematerialized for about 4 hours.
4 hours?
Yeah. Now, I thought it was about 30 to 45 minutes, something like that, because time isn't the same in these dimensions. But so during that encounter, I started having this experience of where non-human and extraterrestrial and humans, where could we connect? And it was at this place of non-locality. It's called in physics and consciousness. So I started practicing this with these ETs.
This episode is brought, it's linked below. Now back to the show.
And
this meditation
Yeah. So we have an app called CE5 Contact. It's probably the most controversial things I'm doing.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah, and it works. And if you look at the movie Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind, you're going to go, whoa, wow. I just sent your producer a picture of a ET that appeared.
Oh yeah, you sent the alien. Can we see the alien that he's?
Well, no, the aliens are from Guatemala.
Okay.
These are extraterrestrial biological entities.
What's the difference?
I'm just making a joke. I know. We're in Florida, but it's.
We make jokes in Florida. They're way dirtier. They're way dirtier than that.
It's impossible.
So this is where'd you see this one?
So this is in Arizona a couple years ago, and we were doing the CE5 contact protocols, you can
Full sprainer, Steve?
Yeah, you have to use full sprain, otherwise it's useless.
Yeah. He's learning how to use it.
There you go. So it looks like a beak, and it's this round head, and you see the eye socket on the left. There's a light source that was not ours coming from his left, and sort of a feathery tunic. Now this is about 3 feet from me. And we had David Marconi, who wrote Enemy of the State with Will Smith, had a great Nikon camera set up on a tripod with a remote. And we had seen what looked like a red orb right between this older gentleman and a member of our team, and it was me. And I said, take a picture here, and he did. And here's this person that we had heard walking around behind us without seeing it with the naked eye. But it captured this person.
It's weird.
It's very unusual.
The hell? Like I can't. It's hard to make anything about it.
I don't know. I mean, the right eye socket. You can see it's a very big head with like a beak-like nose.
I can see that. Yeah.
And then a tunic, and the right hand there. I mean, this is at night with no illumination. By the way, we're out there in the middle of the wilderness in pitch black. So this, by the way, we call this ET the healer because he has appeared at other times, and the man right beside him had lost his hearing since he was in middle or high school, and even with hearing aids, he could barely hear. And this.
Wait, what is that next? Is it? It's just like a light orb or something right there, Steve.
That's just some.
To the left.
This thing?
Yeah.
It's like I don't know. That's the man. That's the older gentleman who was.
That's a person.
Yeah. Yeah, ice check. That's a person.
So it looks like a face floating in the middle of the.
No. He's sitting in we're in chairs in a circle.
Okay.
Yeah. We could give you the whole context of it. But what's interesting is that he was healed of his hearing loss. The next morning he woke up, wow, totally fixed. So it's I've been doing this since I was 18. So now I'm 69, so 51 years. And what I find interesting about retail ufology, it's always I was abducted and I was tortured, and I was this. I'm going, yeah, that's the CIA. Oh, you mentioned the Greys. I know who manufactures those.
You know who manufactures
the
aliens?
Yes.
Well, the Greys things that like the Willie Streamer talks about.
Yeah, the fake ones, as they're called. So
how do they get them to abduct people? Like, there's all these stories that John Mack has talked about.
Oh, yeah, I knew John very well.
Yeah, and then he talked to, I think, hundreds of people that explain being abducted by the little Greys and taken up into ships and had sperm and eggs extracted from them.
Yeah,
how do you explain
that?
Talk
about delusions of grandeur, like they need our sperm in them.
Have you heard the theory that the future human theory, like if there was a cataclysmic event in the future, like when people didn't come back in time to get our DNA to repropagate humanity in the future, that's a hypothesis.
Yeah, I call it the cosmic Noah's Ark.
Yeah, right, yes.
Yeah. No, but I mean, there's a mixture of things. So here, remember this.
Okay.
October 1954. We mastered gravity control.
Who mastered it?
Covert programs in the United States, aerospace.
But there was a couple people working on it. There was Lewis Whitten, and
no, I'm talking about if you take T. Townsend Brown's work,
okay, and T. Townsend Brown,
and the Biko-Brown effect, all that started in the 20s. And if you look at a film that we released a couple years ago called The Lost Century, it kind of unpacks all this. It's a documentary.
Okay.
And people should look at that. It explains all this and this trajectory of how this evolved.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were experiments with very high voltage systems that called an electrogravitic effect where things would lift, right?
Okay.
And that was in the 20s. That was 28, 29. It was replicated in Germany in the Halsey Frost experiment. We have a physics journal. We show that in the film.
Okay.
It's in here for the briefing.
Okay.
Now, imagine those early experiments with so-called anti-gravity.
Okay.
Not a good term, but Bose used the pop culture term. It's actually electrogravitics and electrogravitic field propulsion, but it's not a physics class.
Okay.
So what happened is that that research combined with a augmentation of that research, a big leap forward by studying the extraterrestrial vehicles that we downed in the mid-40s and 50s.
Right.
So by the time those two streams combined into a mighty river of research, but it was covert. As I was referring to that Wilbur Smith document, is the most secret, and he said this is the most secret operation in the United States, exceeding the secrecy of the hydrogen bomb research. Now this is 1950, before we detonated the hydrogen bomb. So imagine something more classified and secret than the H-bomb, the ultimate doomsday weapon.
Mm-hmm.
That's this stuff. So, my uncle had his whole career at Northrop Grumman. He worked on the lunar module that went on. But those big aerospace companies, Northrop Grumman, Lockheed Skunk Works, and now Raytheon, and EG&G, way back then, and others, they got the portfolio for their special projects to study this material, figure out how it worked, and then apply it.
Yeah.
So by 1954, we had operational gravity control, so that we were building our own UFOs. And I always tell people, if you see something you call a UFO or a UAP, you have to ask yourself, it's one of three things. It could be an extraterrestrial vehicle, or NHI craft, is the pop culture now. It can be a man-made one, coming out of one of these big aerospace companies, because they've been zipping around since the late 50s.
Right.
Or it could be neither of them, and it could be some extra-dimensional entity, something from another dimension that's not extraterrestrial.
So a way...
This is where it gets confusing for people, and it's deliberately been commingled. In other words, disinformation specialists from the CIA and other places, like Lou Elizondo,
he called you a terrorist.
Yeah, I know. It's very funny. I'm a terrorist for speaking the truth. Well, that's... Yeah, I mean, as opposed to people who are actually trying to create Armageddon, which would be his crowd.
Yeah.
But the problem is that if you don't have enough of the information, and this information's been in a blackout for 70 years, if you're David Fravor flying a F-18 chasing one of these things, and you're not read in, you're a jet pilot. You're not read into what's coming out of the underground facilities at Skunk Works out there in the desert.
Yeah.
So you're going to immediately think, oh, shit, I just saw an alien craft. No, you saw something that was made at the Skunk Works that was moving in a way with no visible means of propulsion.
I was just trying to clarify earlier on the anti-gravity side of things. Jeremy Riss, alien scientist, who's as a physics historian, was explaining to me that there was two main groups. One was Lewis Witten and the people that he was working on it with, and then Bryce DeWitt, who was working on anti-gravity in like the earlier 50s, like before 54. And he thinks that one of them figured it out, and then I guess, from my understanding, is that went black all of a sudden.
Yep.
Like they got co-opted by somebody, and then like in 50, I think it was 57, there was like a, what was it? There was some big like anti-gravity conference or something,
right,
where they were trying to figure out why would they have that conference in 57 if they had figured it out in 54? You know what I mean?
Well, because it's compartmented. I mean, the left hand doesn't know the right hand exists. I mean, I've done briefings for the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, the 3-star general, and he didn't know anything that was going on with this, even though he made inquiries. He was going on. So everyone thinks that there's sort of this, you're the president, or you're a 3 or 4-star general, and you have an all-access pass. You do not. And that is what my big coming of age on this, why I started the Disclosure Project, right, in 1993, was when I briefed the director of the CIA for Bill Clinton. I learned, and it's a 2 or 3 hour
Woolsey?
Yeah, R. James Woolsey, who's since flipped on everybody.
How did he find you, by the way?
A friend of his, he had been on the board of the think tank, Pentagon think tank, knew him and was following what we were doing. Okay. And it was mainly because in 1992, here in Pensacola, Florida, near there, we had a CE5 contact team, and we vectored in 4 ET craft And one of them was on the front page of the Pensacola paper, got picked up by the intelligence community. And before you know it, I had all kinds of spooks knocking on my door. Everyone who laughs at that, I say, yeah, what you're missing is the main part of the secret, dude. You're missing the big picture too. You're flat earthers if you think the universe is 3D flat. You're a flat earth society. But anyway, so that got on the radar of this think tank that was looking into the subject under a contract with the Pentagon. And then, and the director of that think tank and the CIA director were friends. So once he became director of CIA, he and Clinton and some other people, Webster Hubbell at Justice, were trying to find out about UFOs, and they were being gaslit and lied to or deceived, and they knew it. I mean, Clinton was smart enough to know he was being zoomed. And so they reached out to me to come up and provide the information I had. Now, initially, I will say, if you look in my archive, you'll see the letter of correspondence about this. I thought they were just trying to pick my brain, and there was intel gathering exercise. No, I mean, the director of CIA and the president had been completely denied access, threatened, and told nothing. And I, at that time, look, I'm a 30-something year, mid-30s medical doctor working full-time in his ER, at the show or something. Never seen the show. But the truth is that I thought surely they have more information than I do. This is nuts. So, and they were just lying about what the purpose of the meeting was.
Right.
And they were just trying to gather information from him. But it wasn't. He was shaken, and they really did. And that's when I realized that the organization that's running these covert programs is criminal and has been since the late 1950s, since Eisenhower kind of lost control and he was betrayed. Yeah. So there has been no proper legal constitutional oversight of any of these operations. This is dangerous since at least 1956, somewhere in that period.
Yeah. And that's where Grush came into the picture. He was tasked to track down some of this lost black budget money, right? And that's where then all these whistleblowers started coming out recently.
Well, not really. I mean, that's a late recent event.
Yeah.
Okay, so there were more significant events that happened in the 90s that I'll know about, or I'll talk about. Because Clinton had set up a military team. Because they used to call it Team Blue was the regular military, Team Black were these illegal projects, and he set up what's called Team Red to penetrate those covert illegal programs. Mm-hmm. Most of those, I know some of these guys, most of those guys were killed or absorbed into Team Black. So some of the whistleblowers just now coming forward, some of the older ones had been on Team Red. I can't say which ones, but they'll disclose that when they're ready. And they got totally pulled into these illegally run operations. Now remember, if you're a 18, 20, 25-year-old Delta Force guy or Green Beret, you're not read into the chain of command up above. You just go, yes, sir, and you're going to do what you're going to do. But once they reached a certain level of seniority, they realized they were in an illegal criminal operation, which is when they reached out to me. And they said, one of them said, thank you for what you're doing for those of us stuck on the other side, meaning stuck in this illegal criminal operation, and they won't out. So the good thing is there's a momentum happening now. If we can get whistleblower protections through the Congress and the executive order from the president, where there's a whole dam ready to break of folks like that, that we have, who will come forward and with the evidence, and this will begin to be solved. It's just the beginning. So that's what we're trying to work on, but it way predates Grush. I met with Mr. Grush when he was still undercover and gave him information, and his bosses were people that were people I had briefed in the SCIF, the Secure Compartment Information Facility. So he came out with what he had done, but he was secondhand. He had not been operational. Right. I'm talking about the first-hand operation. And what's interesting, if you look at the Health Oversight Committee hearings, it's all been all these secondhand people. And I told Congressman Burchett and Loon, I said, why don't you subpoena the people that we have? Here's a list of the top 25.
Right.
And these are people, like I just typed, who are operational at the Skunk Works. Interestingly, they never call those people to a hearing. I said, don't call me. I'm just the doorway. I'm the opener, right? Call these guys. And here are their names. And by the way, here's their DD-214, and here's where they're operational. So, you have to wonder why, I mean, are really people that clueless in Washington, or is something going on there? I don't know.
Yeah, so your disclosure project has, I believe, over 400 military witnesses.
760 somehow.
760, yeah. And what would you say is the most credible out of all of those witnesses?
Well, it's the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. Now remember, I think these guys just starting to come out who dealt with the targeting and downing of these craft, and how they've done it, and the collateral damage, the civilians in private airplanes that have been killed in the process. That is one of the biggest stories in American history that's about to come out. So,
Private planes that have come down.
So let me explain how this works. So let's say you're out at some black site out in the desert out west. Okay. I won't say which one I was flying. I've been in this Special Forces guy's chopper that's on the retrieval teams and flown over this area, and seen the equipment, the underground base opening, all that. I have pictures and videos of it. It's in here.
It's in your presidential briefing right here?
And that actually, this is available for people to order now. We've sanitized some of the sensitive names out, and you can go and order it in a hard.
This thing right here.
This whole thing.
How do you order it?
Well, I don't know. I don't do that. My assistant will give you guys a link, but everyone listening can get it.
And how would they go about doing that? They would get the link from your system?
Mm-hmm. No, well, I mean, you can put it up.
I can put a link to it?
And it's drstephenbrewer.com. There'll be a link to it, right, Raven? Anyway,
and then this
I don't do that stuff. But
and then what is your plan with this? Your briefing?
This has already been provided to the incoming new president and to some of his senior folks. And we're continuing, and also to the key oversight committee, Senate Intelligence, Armed Services.
And what was their reaction to it?
Well, they're just now studying it. It's an enormous amount of information and intelligence. So there are some entities that are on the enforcement end of U.S. government that are now drilling down heavy on the same methods and sources that are in here. The people, the witnesses, the whistleblowers, and the facilities and corporations. Probably one of the most significant people to come forward, if we can protect him, is the former chairman of a Fortune 50 company that's been involved with this. It's House, but I'm not going to say which one. And he wants to come forward. He's like 80 years old this year, and he deeply regrets what they've done. And, he's admitted that they have the schematics and the designs to provide free energy, quote unquote, to the whole world. And he really regrets all this secrecy. But at the same time, he as soon as he reached out to me through his assistant and friend,
Fortune 50, one of the top 50 companies.
Turn left onto the slip road. Then turn right.
Pray that man's trust, because it'd be easy for someone to figure out who it is.
It wasn't a military contractor, though.
It's a big company that has a lot of fingers and a lot of pies.
Okay.
But this man then was threatened, and they threatened to kill his whole family and his grandchildren. So what I'm trying to get, and it was, the Senate Intelligence Committee passed in 2023 unanimously the provision to give amnesty or safe harbor to these kind of people, right? Yep. But the House, in the reconciliation of the bill, took it out due to a couple of guys who were, I think, bad actors there.
Yeah, who were those guys again? Were those the Ohio guys? The Ohio?
Mike Turner was chair of Senate Intelligence, and the other Mike Rogers, who was chair of Armed Services, and a few other people gutted that. And it was kind of.
And why? Why do you think those two guys?
Because I think they receive a lot of funding from the very people that need to be exposed. I mean, I think it's not obviously they're carrying water for someone, which is corruption. But as Washington, right? I mean, who's got the money, who's got the blackmail file on you. You know,
Yep.
people get bribed, people get threatened, people get killed.
Mhm.
It's not a conspiracy theory; it's a fact. I've had all those games run on there. So, but I think that someone like that would have a lot of the keys to the kingdom. But if you're at risk for RICO charges, right, federal racketeering influence corrupt organization charges due to the criminal activity that you oversaw as an executive, and maybe worse things, but you're also under threat from the organization keeping the secret of having you or your family killed. Like this gentleman, I don't think he would mind if he got killed, but he doesn't want his children and grandchildren killed.
And what is his? And so, what did he see? What is his connection to this stuff?
No, he was a chairman of a massive corporation, but he was read into a very special project compartmented area dealing with technology.
And that's the reason he doesn't want to come forward publicly, because he's been threatened. His family's been threatened.
Of course. Yeah. And so now I know who he is. And the people who are going to need to know, the president, attorney general, law enforcement, and on down the system will know, or do know by now. So the only question becomes, what are they going to do about it? Now, when I began to tell you about these black sites, right? Now imagine, okay, you're out in the desert stuff, no access, any draft sensors, you're not going to get in there easily. And underneath the ground out there is a huge complex of stiffs. There's subterranean facilities, and some people call them DUMBs, deep underground military bases. And in our briefing document you can get, it actually has 150 or so of these sites where UFO-related operations have been. Some are acute ones, some have been incidental or peripheral ones. Yeah. And that's available for anyone to look at. Anyone who wants to look at it can see it. Okay. And so I'm in this chopper hovering over one of these, and there's the opening from underground where the man-made UFOs go over the test range, and they're hit with electromagnetic weapons to see how hardened they are before they're good to go. Those are man-made, and they're manned with people.
And are these similar to like Tic Tac stuff, the Tic Tac UFOs?
They're all shapes.
They're all different shapes. Eggs?
They're octagonal, they're discs. They're the ones that are Northrop Grumman and Raytheon generally, not all, tend to be triangular or trapezoidal. Not necessarily equilateral triangles, isosceles. And many of the ones that are cigar-shaped or tic-tac shaped or discs or octagonal are Lockheed Skunk Works and BG&Gs and others. So all the prime contractors that we know of where we have sources are named in the briefing document. And I've been building that list for 30 years, right? Ever since I was asked to put it together. And the problem is, and this gets to sort of a gut check here, what are you going to do about it? Because let's say you're the president, if I was on Patrick Bet-David's show a couple days ago, great guy, and he asked me, he said, well, do you think the president is the most powerful man in the world? I said, well, he could be, but he isn't. He showed a clip of Mr. Trump saying he is. But when they realize what they're up against with this, the power you're talking about derives from extraordinary technological prowess. So to make this real for people, I just tell the sort of apocryphal. But in 1997, excuse me, I was asked to do a stand-up briefing for, and this document leaked, a report about this leaked out of Edgar Mitchell's archive when he died. But my military advisor, who I'll be seeing tomorrow, he's retired, and I and Edgar Mitchell, the six-man walk on the moon, and an Eisenhower era whistleblower, right, and my assistant, Sherry, Adam, were in attendance, but I was asked to do a stand-up briefing for Admiral Tom Wilson, who is J2, the head of Intelligence Joint Staff. And, you know, prior to the briefing, I'd sent over something similar to this, but different. But one of the documents that was in there is in here, and it's a National Reconnaissance Office with NRO, the big entity that runs all the spy satellites, document from Area 51, Nellis, warning of civilians trying to spy on the range where they test and do the research on the man-made UFOs, right? And they didn't want that to get out. But in that, it's not been declassified, but it's legit. And it lists the project code numbers and names, right? So, and it's a 91 document. This meeting's in 97, so it wasn't antique, right? So I give it. I have someone hand deliver it to the Admiral prior to the meeting. So he starts digging into this, and he gets paid her. He finds a few key offices where this is going on. He calls them up and he says, hey, you know, I want to be read into this. And he says, I'm Admiral Tom Wilson. I'm J2, head of Intelligence Joint Staff. And they say, sir, we can't discuss this with you. And we don't have a need to know. And of course, his reaction was, well, God damn it. I mean, I'm the head of intelligence with the Joint Chiefs of Staff. How can I not have a need to know? Right. Excuse my language. But, I mean, this is like mind-blowing. Right. All right. So then he gets threatened, and he's threatened with being demoted, where they take a star off your lookout and put you out to pasture with much lower benefits and pay in return.
Yeah. Let's be real.
So he backed off a bit. But at the meeting, at the end of the meeting, and it was supposed to be 45 minutes, I think it went on for 2 or 3 hours. He kept canceling appointments. I asked him, I said, we need your help. You know, I'm just an emergency doctor doing this because I'm interested, but it's serious stuff. And he asked me, who else has had this happen to? I said, well, the Secretary of Defense, the CIA Director, the President. He said, well, what am I going to do? I said, yeah, but you're here key in the military, in the Pentagon. And he says, no. Here's what I've learned. And this is how he said it. He says, I've learned that the best thing I have in the normal constitutional government and military is a B-2 stealth. And that organization have craft that are anti-gravity that can do circles. He did like this, circles around my B-2 stealth. He says it's point, set, match. He said, yeah, we're checkmate because of the technology. So now we're into the horns of the dilemma right here, because, you know, I realized going up against corrupt interests that have that level of technology, which is very dangerous. And when I literally tell people the threat from that organization, which is international, having these technologies far exceeds the threat of China, Iran, Russia, terrorism, and by order of magnitude. And no one's doing anything about it because no one has quite figured out what the threat matrix is, what the threat assessment. So what we're trying to do, not to scare the hell out of these officials, but to say, here's the problem, here's a solution. Now the solution, the best outcome of this that we're recommending is a glide path out that's not kinetic. In other words, not violent. It's not a red on black war or something. It's giving people who want to come forward a path out, and they take it, and it unravels that system, and it gets transformed into another initiative. That those old legacy programs that have been going along without any accountability for 60 plus years, those are put out to pasture. So, and wound down. But it's got to happen that way, or it's going to be a mess.
Are you saying that these organizations that are in possession of this technology and that control this stuff, that are keeping it away from the U.S. government, are they like their own autonomous government, /military /air force that is completely detached from any other world government?
They're detached and embedded at the same time. So,
and almost and more, arguably more powerful.
Oh, way more. Absolutely. This is why, it's interesting when Jimmy Carter, I was asked not to tell this story. He's passed away now, so
He's just your camera.
so when President Carter was some years ago in Spain signing guitars, classical guitars, it was there, part of our team. He said that afterwards, it was a fundraiser for the Carters, and they were auctioning off these guitars around President's time. And at a dinner afterwards, there were a few people there, and someone asked him, they said, "Sir, what was it like being the most powerful man in the world?" And President Carter says, "I wasn't that man." And they go, "What do you mean?" He says, "Well, there are certain things that I had no control over and I wasn't even allowed to know about." And someone giggled, "Oh, they're joking." Yes, that and more. So that was, of course, he was president 76 to 80. Shadow government with its own Air Force, its own Navy, its own funding mechanism that's free from the law and above the law itself. I'm paraphrasing, but that clip is in our archive. And years later, after I did the original Disclosure Project conference in 2001, an attorney on our team who was then an intern, undergraduate intern, met with Senator Entropy, and we had just done the National Press Club event in 2001, right for 9/11, and this attorney, Derek Garcia, has written an affidavit to this effect. He talked to Senator Entropy. He says, yes, like basically these UFO issues, that's the crown jewel of this shadow secret government operation.
Right.
And it is above the Constitution and the law, but the kinds of technologies they have, we're not talking about a jet aircraft or a rocket. I tell people, rockets were cool up until 1954. So if you think a SpaceX rocket is going to all get out, you're only 70 years behind the times, bro. So, but that's fact. But this means that you have an organization. One of the initials on that NRO document was MAGIC. Stands for Majority Joint Intelligence Committee, or MAGI, M-A-J-I.
Ooh, MAGI, that's
MAGI. Yeah.
Do you think that any of these witnesses are strategic disinfo? Like, if I was the secret government that had control of this stuff, I would deliberately inject some bullshit into this. I would absolutely put some fake whistleblowers out there.
Yep, and that's something we have to we've had this happen a couple times. Right before we did the meeting for Admiral Wilson, we had a gathering off-site for members of Congress. And the chairman of the House Oversight Committee was there, Dan Burton, and all those people. And we found out the night before, and I don't credit myself with this, my military advisor, who has to be nameless, and Edgar Mitchell and another person, was sitting at a bar with this guy. And he started telling things that they knew were factually not true. So I got word of that. I was already up in my room, and I said, that person is removed and escorted off the properties immediately, and if necessary by force. Count is, the more I want to hear from multiple corroborating witnesses that don't know each other, so there's no collusion. So that's what we tried to build with this mosaic, this disclosure mosaic, to create the picture.
Yes.
Because you could always have 2 or 3 people who work with each other that confabulate the same nonsense, right? So it's
that's something that happened with this recent fella that was just on Jesse Michaels' podcast, Jake Barber, I believe his last name is.
Oh, I know Jake very well.
Yeah, he mentioned you. Fantastic little documentary that Jesse Michaels put together. And Michael Herrera, I believe.
Yeah.
And he mentioned during that interview that Jake, and I'm probably butchering this, I don't remember it perfectly, but he said that he was a part of some secret black program going to one of your conferences to try to subvert some of your witnesses.
A year and a half ago.
That was a year and a half ago. And then when he heard this guy Michael Herrera's testimony, he said, "Holy shit, that's exactly what I was doing."
Yep.
I saw this with my own eyes.
Yep.
And then he said he had some coming to Jesus moment where he said, "Oh no, I can't do this. I have to go against the grain here."
No, he's legit. He's. I know his cover. I know who he worked for. I've been at facilities.
Jake.
Arbor and his team, and Fred, and also Don Paul. Great guys, and they're not gaslighting anyone. Now, they're not sharing everything either, because it's dangerous. But now there's some unsavory people that I think have attached themselves to these guys. The Lou Elizondo crowd and the whole disinformation nexus of retail.
Yeah, I want to get to that. I want you to explain that to me later. I don't want to interject that right now, but that's something I definitely want to put a pin in.
Yeah. Well, it's just that's the way the world works, man. In 1 part information, 9 parts disinformation.
Right.
1 part truth. And by the way, the best disinformation, false information, it's sort of like a poison pill. It's coated in real information, and you swallow it, and then you're done, right? So this technique of counterintelligence, I'm quite versed in how it operates, and how the PSYOP, psychological warfare operations, run these operations on people who are innocent, good people. But Herrera, by the way, had approached me some years ago, and Michael Herrera was a Marine. For people who don't know, you can go to our archive and see this account and the illustration of what he saw.
Okay. Can you explain it for people who don't?
Sure. Oh. So it was in, I believe, 2009. He was a young Marine, I think 20 years old. And there was a tsunami and earthquake in Indonesia, and they were on an expeditionary force, a humanitarian mission, to go there and help people and out of the Pacific. They were in the Pacific region. And he and 5 of his platoon buddies went off in a direction, and in the jungle, and there was a clearing, and there was a 300-foot diameter, a man-made UFO, basically octagonal.
He knew this was man-made? He knew that it was man-made?
We could tell it was man-made, and it was manned by special operations guys, but in civilian garb. They were told, basically put down your weapons. They confiscated their weapons. They took their IDs. They threatened to kill them for being seen this. One of the things he saw,
they threatened to kill their own U.S. Marines.
Well, they're not their own. This shadow secret government.
Right. Okay.
I mean, those are the real people committing treason and are traitors. And yes, they'll kill their own. I mean, look at Jonathan Weigand's testimony when he was in the Peruvian-Bolivian border, where we shot down an ET craft, and he and his guys came across it first, and the security people who were in there to retrieve it said, "You talk about this, we'll throw you out of the helicopter, and they'll never find you in the jungle." So this happens all the time. They do kill their own people, but they're not their own people.
They're Americans, though, right?
Yeah, they're Americans, but it's these are people who are running a criminal enterprise. The biggest, think of the mafia. It's the largest criminal organization on the planet. Mm-hmm. So, when the FBI is ready and wants to grow up and be serious, they have a real target here.
With technology that very few human beings can comprehend.
So the other thing that Michael Herrera saw was this crate, and it looked like it had like a little oxygen and HVAC mini portable unit on it. And he thought they were running drugs. And it turned out, because Jake was at this conference to try to bump witnesses and see who need to be turned over for either wet works or arrest, he heard this, and of course he immediately texted me, because he has my number, and we went to the green.
Jake did?
Yeah, and his spirit guide.
So he knew you.
Oh yeah.
But he was going to your conference to subvert some of your witnesses.
Well, that's what his job was. It was to find and stop leaks and find out if I had the Panasonic Tough book that had gone missing out of one of these corporations. I know which one it is, that had all this intel on it, because I received stuff all the time, right? And he thought maybe I had it. Now, I didn't know that's why he was there, right? And prior to that, I had had a meeting with one of his security people at a bar near Langley, and near CIA, Tyson's Corner in Virginia, and he gave me a little thumb drive that was like a 10-page description of his involvement and what he was doing. And he subsequently, a month or two later, came June 2023 to this Disclosure Project conference and press conference we did, where Herrera and some other whistleblowers were speaking. But he immediately said, "I need to see you." So I go back to the green room, And he says, that isn't drugs. Those are people. And so what they were doing, the way they get their psionic and other staff, let's call it, at these underground facilities, is that, let's say there's a terrible disaster or war-torn area. Yeah. People are desperate. And they're not kidnapped per se, but it's under duress. They're basically told, you can either come with us and be part of our program, and I'll describe it, or you can stay here and die. You choose. Now, I wouldn't call that a very, but this is how this is brutal stuff, right?
Oh, yeah.
And that's what was in those crates, is there people. And there were people who were candidates for being...
How do they discern what kind of people they need?
They were looking for people with a certain demographic that they felt would have a high psionic capability.
And am I correct in saying they were children?
They were children, there were women. Somehow there's a tendency for left-handedness for that ability, and gay and bisexual men. So that's who they were looking for, because like Ingo Swann I knew him very well, Ingo, and he was a gay guy, brilliant remote viewer. So, and who cares? I mean, people get hung up on that.
Well, it's like if you're gay, raise your hand. If you're left-handed, I need you.
No, they don't do it that way. Let's not be silly. But I mean, they'll scope out, and then they'll say and of course it's a rough sort of assessment. They're then crated up, taken to a facility, and the ones that pass muster for their psionic psychic capabilities go through a program. Now, a lot of those end up dying because they're put on drugs, dopamine, electromagnetic enhancement. So many end up dying or put in comas. And
wait, hold on. And so getting these people. So this specific situation, Michael Herrera was in Indonesia after there was an earthquake. They essentially, you don't want to say kidnapped because that's not a nice way of putting it, but it's essentially kidnapped them.
And taken under some duress. I mean, come with us or die. Right. I mean, I don't know. You can call that whatever you want.
It sounds like some level of human trafficking. Brought these children to a secret base, secret black site that they control for psychic warfare.
And for training to be psionic hijackers of ET craft. That's just the next part of it.
And they trained them to be psionic. To hijack these craft. And you're saying that they gave them drugs? What kind of drugs do they give them, and why do they give them drugs?
I don't have the whole protocol. I just know that they were dopamine related, and also there were electromagnetic systems. And there were a lot of bad outcomes, but the ones who passed through it have an extraordinary capability, but it's an enhanced. So basically the way they described it to me is that you have the people who are the operators, say the regular human Hoover folks.
Right.
These people are humans that are sort of machine tools that are then used to then tap into the guidance and control systems of these ET craft, because they're using what I just described, technology-assisted consciousness, where you think to it. You see these accounts of the ET standing there touching something, they just think, and it goes there. So, okay, I know this is getting out there, but
it's not. The crazy thing is, it makes sense.
No, it totally makes sense. And of course, this goes back to my 1973 experience with the ETs, where I knew this is what they were using. So, and I believe that's why in 1992, General Stubblebine personally offered me $2 billion to be part of his little freak show, by the way.
What?
Yeah. I said, no gracias. He
offered you $2 billion? $2
billion in 1992, yeah. With this.
Why did you say no?
Well, because I'm not a corrupt person.
Oh my God, $2 billion.
I save lives for a living. I don't want to be part of a cabal of sociopaths and psychopaths destroying the planet, right?
What did he say? There's no price. $2 billion.
I'd be part of his team, a senior member of his team, because of my abilities and also being a doctor with these capabilities. And they were going.
And who was he exactly?
He had been.
I'm not familiar with him.
Head of INSCOM, and he was head of Army Intelligence, and General Albert Stubblebine III. And Bert approached me, and then I said, "Not only no, but hell no." And then he went to my wife. We're about to have our 46th anniversary, and he tried to sweet talk her into this madness. And he was very nice. I said, no, devils speak with forked tongue. But
and what did he do? Why was he such an evil person?
Oh, he was part of that whole group. He was like, he's passed away, but he was part of the same kind of group that people like Colonel Alexander and Elizondo, they're all part of that whole operation. They have different roles, but his role was to interface from that black illegal program world with the UFO subculture. Back then, this is like 33 years ago, right? So psychological information manipulation, trying to handle the public perception of this stuff in the United States is basically what he wanted you to help him do. Yes, but also be part of that operational team is what I think, in terms of these capabilities. Because he knew that he approached me right after there was proof that our CE5 contact had worked, and there were these 4 ET craft that appeared here in Florida, outside Pensacola. So that is when he surfaced, exactly that. Now, of course, everyone makes fun of us for doing that. Oh, it's Ouija board stuff. I thought, like, the hell it is. You think these civilizations are using your iPhone? Why would they be using 20th century, early 21st century communications technologies? Mm-hmm. They're using stuff like Elon would like to do, Musk would like to do with Neuralink, except without the wires, right? Not the speed of light, the speed of thought. Like that. Right. All right? Instant. So that program has been in development for decades, but it reached a level of success, let's call it. I mean, if you can call hijacking ET craft and then blowing them out of the sky with electromagnetic pulse weapons, which are illegal, by the way.
I just can't get over $2 billion. You're a better man than me.
Well,
I might have been doing it. I would have saluted and been a PSYOP, fucking head of PSYOPs.
I'm not interested. Look, I'm not rich, but I'm comfortable as a doctor. I don't need that, and I've never had aspirations for that.
Yeah,
and
I say it all the time. Whether people in the comments who think I'm CIA funded podcast, if the CIA wants to offer me $1 million, I'm signing me up.
Well, that's the joke. I mean, I bootstrapped this whole effort for 35 years with a handful of people and no office, and a couple. Some volunteers and 1.5 staff members and my wife and me. So I said, oh yeah, if I were that guy, I wouldn't be doing this.
Do you ever think back, like just laying in bed late at night, like, God damn it, maybe I should have taken that $2 billion?
No, never. Never, because then you're owned. You're an owned asset. I value my freedom. I value my freedom more than I value all the money on it.
Did he offer it in payments, or was it like an upfront lump sum?
Well, the way he described it is that after the Cold War ended and the Soviet Union was falling apart in the late 80s, early 90s, that they had seized a bunch of assets in Eastern Europe. They had a slush fund, and that I would have control and access to that, and it was a lot of money. And look, the kind of black budget money these guys have, it's enormous. There's another guy who told me in '93, a couple months before I agreed to CIA director, and he was technically involved with the UFO subculture, but he was a tech guy who was embedded with this shadow government. And he said, look, we have given at least 10,000 people $10 million apiece or more to secure their cooperation with what we're doing. And then he made another offer to me. And this was about 1.5 years after General Stubblebine. So I said, no, thank you. I don't want to go that route. I want to stay independent, free. But,
and I would imagine the disinfo people, they probably target media personalities.
Oh, sure.
They probably target podcasts, maybe. If they're still doing it. If they're still, imagine what they were doing with Richard Doty in, like, what was it, the 70s, 80s?
Yeah.
With Paul Benowitz and the level they went to go to these UFO conferences and try to get these people and say, hey, I'm going to give you some secrets if you just go out there and get us some intel on these people. And meanwhile, the secrets they're giving them are like half-baked bullshit.
Have you ever seen the documentary Unacknowledged that we did? It's at about 800, 900 million.
I don't think I've seen that one, no. I watched Sirius.
Unacknowledged is the one that prompted him to shove Elizondo out into the public from his counterintelligence operation at the Pentagon. It's had well over 800 million people see it, and in that we interviewed Mr. Doty, and he admits carrying bags of cash to people.
Oh yes, I have seen this. I've seen this clip.
And he also admits that there were abduction programs that we were doing, but then he got really scared. He said, I can't talk about that.
Right.
But I have multiple people who confirm that. Now, we also have a book in '92 that Jacques Vallée wrote, who's a very, well-known researcher on this, astronomer, astrophysicist, I think. And he admits to having a document from the CIA from 1985.
Jacques Vallée?
Mm-hmm. And go look at it. This is in the briefing, where he admits that this document he won't release that. I think he's been threatened. And it talks about the agency, the CIA, going down to Argentina and Brazil, abducting peasants, making it look like aliens were abducting them, using these advanced technology systems for its, and I'm quoting, their psychological warfare value. So imagine how easy, it's like taking candy from a baby in the amateur UFO research subculture to stage this stuff and get everyone on Twitter talking about how the aliens did X, Y, and Z. And they're staging, it's called stagecraft. I know what the technologies are. I have debriefed people who are operational on the man-made UFOs doing it. The cattle mutilations have nothing to do with ETs. It's all us. That we can prove.
So the Project Gasbury or something, where they detonated in the 70s, they detonated a subterranean nuke, and they had helicopters going out and basically, is this correct? Where they were mutilating cattle and they were doing surgical operations and taking out certain parts of the cattle, the tongue, the glands, and trying to determine whether they had been infected with this sort of radiation, whether the food and the crops and the cattle have been infected with this stuff.
Well, that's one operation. There's another operation to get substrate material, biological growth material, for their little weird gray and other reptilian looking, the man-made ETs, right? Because some of them are not just robotic, some are. But the more advanced ones are sort of what they call bio-nano machines. So they have a biological and a technological component, but they're man-made. And people go, this sounds too far out. I said, but wait, imagine what kind of, if you have that kind of mad scientist mentality, it's like Dr. Strangelove, and you've got the virtually limitless funding, black budget and otherwise, criminal, drug running, everything.
Yeah.
And you've got ET technologies that you're studying for decades. You're going to be able to come out with a whole constellation of dirty tricks for people.
It's so interesting to detangle this stuff.
Well, that's my job, is to try to make sense out of this madness.
And from my understanding of the cattle mutilation is the Atomic Energy Commission, like when they did that, I think it was in '67, where they detonated the subterranean nuke to find natural gas reserves in Dulce, New Mexico. What they did was the cattle mutilation was like a monitoring program to assess radiation leakage in the ecosystem or whatever. And at the same time, they were testing some of this exotic aircraft over the same location. The people started to think, oh my God, these aircraft are doing this to the cattle, it's aliens. So they said, oh, the people are saying that? We're going to keep flying our aircraft over those cattle testing and mutilation deals. So that was like insane level of just public perception.
But that's common, and then all you have to do is have someone write, an alien harvest like Linda Moon Howell, or you have people write abduction books. And what's interesting, the very people who are setting this up will guide those victims, and they are victims. I'm not saying these abduction people aren't real. They have been victimized, but they haven't been taken by extraterrestrials. They've been taken by covert human special operations made to look alien.
Right.
So it's a look-alike, right? So those programs, they sell, and the media, which is as corrupt as anything you can imagine, the legacy media, a lot of those people, they're, like I will be absolutely not only shadow banned, but banned to tell the truth on a lot of media. Whereas if you're going forward telling a lie, boom, you're on 60 Minutes. Boom, you're on. That's true. Because the big media is, I think, probably more corrupt than any other institution in the United States or the world.
Yeah.
And being controlled by these interests.
Yeah, but how do they? I understand how the media is controlled by advertising dollars, but how do you think they're controlled by these rogue military aerospace companies?
Money and control.
They're backdooring money to them.
They're Knox. They have a non-official cover. By day and public persona, they're a media person. They're actually working with the agency or some other entity that's part of this compartmented shadow government. And I know people like that. I mean, probably if I had taken the money, I would have been one of those guys, right?
Yeah.
So, that's how that works. And it makes one of the problems with Washington is everyone's so busy doing a million different things. They have 99 things to do every day, and this thing, as you pointed out at the beginning, you're right, is such a confusing mess of conflicting information. That they just go, I don't want to hear it. It is too complicated, right? But that is part of the reason they've made it complicated. It's obfuscating. It hides it.
Yeah, exactly.
By making it just incomprehensible.
It's impossible to know what's real.
We have to make it understandable and kind of. I liken this to the epiphany moment in The Wizard of Oz when Dorothy and whoever, the Scarecrow, and they pull back the curtain. And there's this old crudmudgeon pulling the levers, right? That's what this is. So, part of what we have to do is not just say, here's the evidence for NHI craft and people, extraterrestrial craft and people, but here's the other part of it. Here's the dominant information, disinformation, that's out in ufology, in the media, in documentaries, in films and books, has actually been staged by the very people trying to keep it secret. So that you're looking over here and not the truth. And they're very good at doing this, Danny. They're extremely good at it.
One of my favorite stories was from Annie Jacobson in her Area 51 book, where she interviewed the CIA pilots who were test flying the first jet planes over the Air Force Base, and they said they purposely brought gorilla masks in the cockpit in the chance that they flew by a civilian aircraft. They put the gorilla mask on so that they're poisoning that story already. So if the guy goes to the bar later, dude, I saw a monkey flying a jet plane.
Well, and the early abductions in the late 50s, early 60s, they had the man-made UFOs, and they had some guys very short stature, they're not quite looking normal, and they're kind of like Hollywood. You can make a guy look like Darth Vader or whatever. That they had that stagecraft, and it was incredibly convincing. Because even now you look at one of our witnesses, whistleblowers who came forward a year and a half ago, Stephen Digna. He was at Fort Irwin, California in 2000. And he was called out by some Raytheon guys to look at some objects that were out over the range. And they had the fire exercises because of this. And it was a triangular, not quite equilateral, but more of a pointed triangular craft. And they didn't know he picked up a pair of night vision scopes. And he looked at it, and he saw the detail on it. And then he saw that there were several others that were holographic projections of the real one. And so it looked like there was a fleet of them. And this is how you stage a fake alien attack.
They had this was all part of that declassified Northwoods thing where they were trying to stage a fake invasion over Cuba.
Well, no, this was a separate incident, but it's very similar
to that.
It's very similar, and so they were very upset that he figured that out, right? And the Raytheon guys, a few days later, abducted him and his wife. I'm coming back from the movie, back to the base on this road, road. And if anyone who had seen that craft and what happened would have sworn it was a alien vehicle, and it was Raytheon. Now, he suffered terrible damages. He's very damaged. He's very sick. So, that is what happens if you get too close to the truth. And he's an incredibly sweet man, very courageous. He's totally telling the truth. But I would say if you took 1 million people on Earth and showed them that craft, that Raytheon object craft in 2000, this is 25 years ago, right?
Right.
I don't think one person would think that it was man-made. And this is a problem for the National Security Council and the president. Because everyone assumes that what I'm telling you, they know. They don't. If you've seen the documentary Unacknowledged, you know more about this subject than virtually anyone in the U.S. Congress, except the bad apples who are on the payroll of the shadow secret government.
Right. Well,
so this is a problem. I mean, if you want to live in a free society, in a democracy, you can't have something this important completely ignored by your elected officials, right?
And also the benefit of having so much bullshit out there is if the truth does get out, it doesn't fucking matter because what are the chances that they're going to pick that as being the truth?
Well, that's now you're very smart because you just hit the nail in the coffin that keeps me up at night.
And that's why I don't trust any of these whistleblowers because I don't think.
Well, I know the ones I know, and now here's someone like Mr. Grush. He was telling 100% the truth until he started telling tall tales that were being fed to him by Elizondo, right? About how the aliens had blown up villages in, I don't know, South America or someplace.
Elizondo told him that?
Yeah. So he fell into that disinformation trap along with the information trap. But a lot of people do that. And why? Right. Because those guys will say, hey, I can get you a $10 million Booker movie deal, and I can get you on 60 Minutes. So, there are advantages to going with those folks as opposed to doing it, let's call it clean. Because doing it clean is a hard path. I mean, it's been a big struggle for me and my family, and, you have all kinds of problems because of it. But I don't regret it. I mean, I wouldn't do anything different at all. But it's dangerous and it's very ungratifying. From a personal point of view, nobody would do it, except I feel that this is something, if this doesn't get resolved properly, what Werner von Braun warned about, right? He said, look, the whole plan is to stage an alien threat so we can unite the world around this sort of fascist, totalitarian, militaristic sort of thing. It's like the movie Independence Day, right? We'll say, let's go kick alien butt. And you see the Arabs and everybody in the world united to fight the aliens. So that's already at a CIA PSYOP scripting. And guess what? 99% of legacy ufology, that's the narrative. They're the good aliens and the bad ones, and so it's Star Wars, right? It's all that narrative. And I go, at least members of Congress are saying, look, if these civilizations were hostile, given that their technologies are hundreds of thousands of years more advanced than ours, we'd be gone. We'd be a charcoal briquette floating through space. Now, do they have that? This is not to say, I'm not naive. This is not to say that those civilizations don't have some self-interest. Because what would you think? I mean, just put yourself in the shoes and through the eyes of an ET. You come across this planet, and in a few decades, it goes from, muskets and machine guns to thermonuclear weapons
pointing at the heads of each other
to very advanced electromagnetic weapons, including the so-called scalar ones that are knocking ET crap down. And then the same group going off the reservation of any controls reverse engineers your ET technologies and start using it against you. Got it? That's the crisis that no one's talking about. And Jake and people like him will say, it's at the point now where they just say AT, the advanced technologies humans have, to most people on Earth would be indistinguishable from an ET vehicle or NHI craft. And there's a big risk there because, number one, they could stage a false flag attack and everyone would think it was alien, which is what their plan is. That's what the drones were all about, by the way. I knew Mr. Trump at that long, and his press secretary commented on that. We know what that was. That was a PSYOP.
That was a PSYOP?
100%.
Coordinated by who?
By the same people who are trying to be sure that when this comes out this year and next, that it's done with the specter of fear. We don't know. People look at the sky, so I'm afraid.
They look just like hobby drones. Like they looked. They weren't moving crazy at all.
Oh no, I know a team that was under contract with Lockheed Martin that has some images of some of this stuff, and some of them are pretty amazing. And some of the daytime ones that they've captured. Now, they're not extraterrestrial, they're our advanced stuff. But again, and some have said, well, these are originating from China. But that's a misnomer because this shadow government entity is transnational. You can label whatever country you want, it doesn't matter. It operates, when I was, the first time I went to meet with the latest efforts about 3 years ago at the Senate Intelligence Committee, SCIF, and I went in there and I said, see that map of the world? Erase all the geopolitical boundaries, like the boundary between Canada and the United States or Mongolia and China or whatever.
Yeah.
This organization, the world is their oyster. They don't care about that. So now, the truth is, people like Jake Barber and his guys are patriots who got stuck in that system, as I said, and they deserve a clean path out, a safe path out. And that's what has to happen. That's got to happen from the Congress and from the president's executive orders, which I've seen some drafts of those. And
So, yeah,
they're in here. The recommendations are in here for what those need to be, and they need to be done yesterday.
we kind of just got really sidetracked down a crazy rabbit hole after we started talking about Jake and Michael Herrera's situation, where they were extracting these people out.
Yeah, and he's the only guy who I've ever heard about who saw something like that and was not killed.
Really?
Only survived. His guys, yes. Absolutely. It's a miracle he wasn't killed. And I told him that. I said, you have no idea how rare it is for someone like you, a kid, 20 years old, seeing something like that, for them not to just erase you.
So, yeah, I remember from that story, Jake was like saying, the guys were saying, should we smoke these guys? Should we smoke these guys? Blah, blah, blah. And they ended up not doing that.
No.
So they're taking these children from foreign countries, these underdeveloped places,
and adults.
And adults, but the primary reason is because they are out of a civilized environment. They're not in like a metropolitan city. They're not around technology all the time. They're in a completely native environment, and they're eating, I don't know, maybe unprocessed foods, natural foods. So they're more connected to nature somehow, and that somehow makes them more in tune to this psychic consciousness, the psionic stuff that he's talking about. And they put them in this program, give them dopamine drugs, and hook them up to all kinds of technology, and use them to summon these eggs. This is what he said. Summon the eggs.
Well, not just the eggs. It's all different kinds of crap. But it's not. It's more than just some.
Okay.
So let me unpack this a little more.
Okay.
Years ago, you heard about this weird-looking drone that kind of looked like a UFO that the Iranians were able to break into its guidance system and land, and then study to reverse engineer it.
You guys heard about this?
Oh, it's all in the media. So, but if you look into that,
Steve, maybe you can find it. What year?
I can't remember. It was in the last
Iranian drone that was caught.
Ours that they intercepted and hijacked it basically by wire.
Iran did?
Yes, and landed it at a base in Iran, and then studied the reverse engineering.
You gotta find this shit, dude.
Yeah, but it was a drone. It was not a UFO.
Right.
It looked weird. It was a very unusual shape. And now imagine being able to do that with this, instead of guide by wire, right?
Right there. U.S. drone recovered by Iran, 2011.
I'm sure there have been.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, see one of those strange looking ones.
Sophisticated spy planes. U.S. intelligence is spying intensely on Iranian sites believed to be developing nuclear weapons and long-range missiles. Bob Orr tells us an unmanned U.S. drone did vanish over the weekend.
The secret stealth drone, nicknamed the Beast of Kandahar, is one of America's most sophisticated intelligence tools. For the past 4 years, the RQ-170 has flown high-altitude surveillance missions over the battlefields in Afghanistan.
Okay, I get
All right, so here's my point in this is that this sort of nonsense happens all the time.
Yeah.
What my point of it is, they were able to break into the encrypted, hardened guidance system, because these are all flown, a lot of them out of Nellis from or bases out in the desert underground, and they're unmanned, but they're on the other side of the world. But they were able to break into that system, the command and control guidance, and land it. They didn't crash it.
Did they do that with this consciousness stuff?
No, they didn't. I'm using this as an analogy if I can get through my sentence. So that's an analogy. Now imagine having an interstellar vehicle, an HI craft, and their technologies are consciousness, thought, interfacing. So you train these people to basically hack into their guidance system when no one's looking, and you hijack it instead of landing it, bring it over to an area. Sometimes you can land the ET craft, but often what they do is they hit it with an electromagnetic pulse weapon, and it either is disabled and falls to the ground, or it's blown it to pieces. Now, what I was getting ready to tell you is that in these same areas, they'll put up a TFR, which is basically a temporary flight restriction area over area of airspace. If there is a civilian aircraft that strays into that, and they're using these electromagnetic pulse weapons, they will blow the innocent civilian Cessna out of the sky. And I know this for a fact. Sometimes the electromagnetic pulse goes outside the TFR and hits a totally aircraft that was trying to stay out of the TFR. So now we have over the continental United States a real threat to air traffic, which are always blaming it on the aliens. No, the real threat to air traffic are the man-made UFOs and these sort of operations because these are not always done over permanent flight restriction areas like a top secret Air Force base.
Yeah.
They're done in these other places, right? So this is a real problem. I brought it up to officials in Washington. And what's astounding to me, I want to vent a little bit here. You know, I've been blowing the whistle on this nonsense since 93. And you always wonder, I think we have something called the FBI or law enforcement. Now, we can prove through our direct witnesses kidnapping, murder, treason, killing innocent civilians like I just described, embezzlement of U.S. federal dollars into black projects without oversight and oversight of the president or Congress. On and on. Half the federal penal code is being violated by this organization. And it's precisely where is the Congress and the White House and the FBI. So now that we have a new administration and a new Congress, and this is all beginning to come, I think that the public listen. Need to contact their senators and House member and the White House and say, look, we need to get this resolved, but you need to enforce the law and protect, the American democracy, but also the American public. And that's not happening yet. And so that group goes unchecked while these terrible atrocities keep going. Now, what I would like to see happen is that those operations get wound down peacefully, because there's as I mentioned earlier, a glide path out to basically transform that mess into something that's forward-looking. And I think all the whistleblowers I know, that's what they want to see, because an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind. And if you go kinetic, if you go into a violent confrontation with an organization that have assets that are way beyond anything, as Admiral Wilson said, that they can deploy, it's not going to be good.
Yeah, I mean,
it's a suicide.
What would it be like to go to war with one of these?
I know exactly, and I'm advising a group that has been asked to do exactly that if it comes to it. And I don't want to talk about operational details about it.
A U.S. military group?
I won't talk about what entity it is. Okay. But it's a SAP, it's TSSCI, Top Secret Special Compartment Information. And I've been asked to provide everything I can, and I will. And I have been. I've been doing this for 36 years. But now we have a critical mass of people who have details. I mean, talked about some of the whistleblowers that are still behind the curtain that could be brought in and who know of multiple places. So there was one gentleman who was about to come forward and got threatened, but he was read into 18 unacknowledged special access projects going before this. He had baseline clearance across 18 in a top secret Pentagon office. So we have people like that. They're living. They need to be protected. He's afraid of not only being killed, but his pension being erased, because he signed an 80-year non-disclosure agreement that said that if he ever discussed any of this, that he would lose his freedom, but also his pension. And he's getting up in years. He has some war injuries. He's a hero. And I can't, what I never do is just shove someone like that out. I mean, I'm a doctor, so if it's like a doctor-patient confidentiality. But at a certain point, the people who can protect people like him have a legal obligation. I will say that given what is in here, that the unredacted part, what people can get is what has some redacted, like this guy's name's redacted. But there is a dereliction of duty here if they don't deal with this. And I think the American public, they need to hear. I've had so many members of Congress and the Senate say, we really need to hear from our constituents on this, right? Now, people are so apathetic, they just think everything happens by itself. No, it doesn't. You got to create a movement. So I'm sort of an activist that way. You got to have people say, look, we want this resolved. We want this fixed yesterday. But we also want to bring out the technologies that would save the biosphere and eliminate poverty. So imagine, I don't think the things that are flying at 200,000 miles per hour should come out right now that are man-made, because that's a missile delivery system. You don't want every terrorist in Mogadishu having that to boom, do something over downtown LA. But the things that would sit on your table here and run this building from what's called the 0 point or quantum vacuum energy, that needs to come out. And that would then give us a civilization without pollution and without poverty within certainly your lifetime, maybe not mine, because I'm almost 70 in June, but it would be an amazing leap forward. And so I think my 4 daughters and 12 grandkids would actually have a planet to live on, instead of it just being ruined by these 1800s technologies we're using, you know? So that is the big peace dividend. Let's call it the big peace dividend of this all coming out then, is that imagine a civilization without pollution and where your energy needs are met without cost. Once you have you're like a heat pump or something smaller, right? Provide all the energy for your car or your business or your house, and with no bill, no electric bill. The problem with that, and this is what Patrick Bet-David said the other day to me, he said, no one wants that to come out because there goes trillions of dollars in assets, right? All the public utilities don't need them. All the oil, gas, coal, nuclear power don't need them. Right. An electric plug-in car like a Tesla don't need it. Sure. So, well, you could use the electric motor part, but the 900 pounds of lithium-ion batteries,
the idea is like
don't need it. Right. Yeah.
Conventional transportation and petroleum industries that prop up our economy are going to be all of a sudden irrelevant if we have some crazy 0 point anti-gravity technology.
Well, again, the anti-gravity technology really can't come out right yet, but the other can.
The 0 point edition.
The 0 point, what I call the station, the basically a power plant that generates energy. You don't want something that's flying at that kind of maneuverability in the hands of unstable failed states and whatnot. Now, I always point out to people, the worst people in the world have that technology now, because these are rogue shadow government operators that are doing all these terrible things, and I think they have more terrible things they're planning to do, which I don't want to go into. But I think we ain't seen nothing yet from that crowd.
I wanted to ask you about Roswell, specifically because I've talked to Amy Jacobson about Roswell, and she wrote about it in her book. I'm sure you're familiar with what she said. There was an EG&G engineer that was a source for her, and he told her that it was a craft piloted by, remote controlled by the Soviet Union, and it had deformed children in there that were surgically altered by Mengele, or the Nazi Mengele, yeah. And it was crashed here to basically sow chaos. And she asked him, she's like, why the hell wouldn't you say this? This would make them look terrible, and it would be great for us if we, were able to expose this, and they would be completely humiliated on the world stage. And he said, because we started doing the same exact thing that they were doing.
Well, I'm not so sure of that, because we have interviewed people who are now deceased who handled the bodies, and they most certainly were not that. So now, have there been events like that? Yes, and we've confirmed that Russia and probably China have these same very likely. But see, a one source account, I know the EG&G folks. One of the G's is Greer. I'm not related, just on the record. But again, a one source. No, but if you look at the people who were there at the retrieval site of the one that was not blown to smithereens, that was no man-made object. But in 1947, the only thing we had that would have been electrogravitic were ones that were unstable. So the what was called the disc that we brought over from Nazi Germany at the end of the war, that was not stable. And if you look at some of the old UFO home movies, and you see it looks like they're like falling like a leaf, like this. Those are early man-made ones that didn't have the gyro, let's say, or the stable. They had not mastered the gravity control. That was 54, late 1954. So those craft would be very not that stable, but they were man-made. But if you look on the inside of them, like what's called the ARV that Brad Sorensen saw, and Mark McCandlish, who's passed away, illustrated for us and got the sort of good concept of the schematics. All the interior components, and this is late 50s, early 60s, were Mercury era components when you looked at it. Now it was electrogravitic, it had gone out into space before we landed on the moon, but it wasn't interstellar, and certainly if it came to ground, it would be obvious it was man-made components, like right away. Mm-hmm. So I point out to people, one of the big confusions here is that, and it makes it easy once you understand there's the man-made and there's the non-human ET. But if you don't, and in here is a number of craft that are illustrated, and they're side by side where you see a man-made one versus an ET. Yeah. But I will say,
can I see that one?
Well, I'd have to flip, we'd be flipping around. But
so was Roswell man-made or was it ET?
The one that's the famous case, and I think there may have been some cover cases that are mixed up. The 1945 White Sands event and that Roswell event were ET. There were, obviously, if you're out in that area, this is where you would be testing your prototype. So if we already had, remember, the Beefhill-Brown effect from the 1920s to 40s, and then we get the Nazi disc that was brought over by billionaire Paul Mellon and General Patton and Alan Dulles, and it was a lot more advanced than anything we had in terms of gravity stability. So, and that's 45. So you can imagine in the 40s into the early 50s, there had been a number of these that would malfunction, go down. They wouldn't want people to know that we're working on that technology, and they would be love for people to think it was alien or ET.
Right.
So I think that, again, when you start getting into this sort of puzzle palace of information, disinformation, you have to first have a sort of a guidebook. I liken this to being a doctor and having what we call differential diagnosis. So, someone comes in with chest pain. So a very masterful counterintelligence and disinformation folks. Yeah. And they're very good at it.
I want to talk about the disinformation stuff and the Elizondo stuff. I got to go leak real quick, so we'll pause real quick.
Yep,
we'll be right back.
Absolutely.
All right, we're back. Sorry, I can't let. I gotta ask you that again. We were just talking about the quiet zone in West Virginia and how you do the CE5 protocols, and you said you let the ETs know that the Earth is armed.
Right. One of the protocols, if you get the app, the CE5 Contact app, I can get it. In part of the training, and when we're doing these sort of remote viewing contact, we let them know that they should only appear in any way that is safe and appropriate for that time, place, and route, and that the Earth has a lot of systems that can pick them up when they come out of, let's call it, trans-dimensional space-time into 3D. So if you're let's say you're an ET craft, you could be totally invisible to all sensors because you can shift, let's say, the resonant frequency of that whole craft and everyone. I can shift out of this dimension into a very higher frequency. So it's not 3D, but then it can pop into 3D. This is why people see them materialize and dematerialize. And when they're in the non-3D form, so they're not solid, you're not going to be able to strike them and down them as easily.
Right.
This is why we have so many weird phenomenon. You know, it's funny, the CIA has a term, WSFM, it stands for Weird Science and Frickin' Magic. An engineer knew it, Northrop Grumman just calls it pure fucking magic, PFM. And so when you start getting into either the high end of the electronics that are man-made, or the interstellar extraterrestrial manifestations and phenomena, you're dealing with some very strange stuff, right? And you would expect that, but it's not what people expect when they usually get introduced to this idea. So we make it very clear to these visitors that, you know, there are satellites that have what are called neutrino light detectors on them that started in the 70s. They can pick them up when they drop out of, let's call it trans-dimensional higher frequency into 3D. Boom, it's a signature. So there's a neutrino light scatter that happens. And there are Earth-based sensors, there are space-based, and aircraft. And so they'll pick these objects up, and then they'll then triangulate them and hit them with one of these electromagnetic or scalar weapons. So because we're doing this, it's very different from what was going on that Jake Barber talked about. We're not luring them over so we can hit them and kill them and reverse engineer their stuff. We're doing it as sort of a ambassadors, as it will, as civilian ambassadors from humans to them, sort of for peaceful contact. We're not doing it to get rich quick and make another widget. So
are there beings inside these things?
Yes, not all of them. I mean, some are unmanned, and some have the equivalent of a android drone that's ET, because, you know, they know how dangerous Earth is.
And don't, like, my brain just thinks, like, they're so advanced, trans-dimensional ETs. Don't they have better things to do than to interface with a couple people that are meditating in the middle of nowhere?
No, they don't, because if they're assigned to do something about the situation here, they need a point of contact, right? I mean, let's stop for a minute. The reason I started this whole project in 1990 was not the Disclosure Project. That was an accidental outgrowth of the main project.
It started with CE5.
It started with CE5 contact. And the reason for that was that I realized that it was either in complete denial, our society, our media, or most people in the government, or we were targeting them and killing them. There was no one on the earth setting up, let's call it, a peaceful outreach that would be, let's just say, an ambassador level, where you're just willing to be someone who does this out of goodwill to establish the beginnings of a relationship between humans and these other civilizations. And I realized no one was doing that. And so that's why I started this whole organization in 1990. It was not to do the Disclosure Project. I kind of got dragged kicking and screaming into that once I realized that, you know, like most people, they think that the president and the Congress are in control of all these covert programs, and they know what's going on. When I realized that how dangerous this organization is, that had gone completely off the leash of any oversight, that's when I started doing the Disclosure Project. But that's not what I was mainly interested in.
But you have to warn these trans-dimensional ETs that they have to be careful for people beaming them out of the sky, right?
Well, we just do it as just a reminder, because we don't want to be responsible for the loss of life, whether it be human or ET. So, you know, I'm a doctor, so above all, do no harm, right? I mean, you know, the saying that doctors are supposed to live up to. So we don't want to set up a situation, and so it's not to say we think they're not monitoring this. It's just to remind them, and also don't be so willing to do something in this dimension because we're wanting this, right? Because humans are really wanting. The ones that come on these events with me, they really want to make there are a lot of people who are very pure-hearted about it. They're not all just jerks, right, out there. We have wonderful people, millions of people who've been doing CE5 now. I mean, William Shatner got it and then went up in that space thing, and all these people. And so what we're wanting to do is show these civilizations there's another side of humanity that isn't a warmongering bunch of jerks wanting to blow them out of the sky, right? But who is doing that? The State Department? The UN? No. So I liken this to back in the Cold War when there were physicians for social responsibility who were doctors going over to the old Soviet Union to try to create a rapprochement and a dialogue, right? This just take this on a cosmic level to where there should be humans reaching out to these civilizations for not some ulterior motive to get their goodies and get rich or turn them into a weapon system or blow them out of the sky, but because there's an opportunity coming up for humans to be part of a larger cosmic family, or whatever you want to call it.
So what kind of communication are you having when you're summoning these beings?
We don't summon them. The King of England would summon a valet.
What do you call it?
I know Jake uses that term and it's appalling. You should never use that term.
What do you use?
We invite them.
Okay.
You summon your Uber driver, right? I mean, this is disrespectful. It's completely disrespectful.
Okay. Well,
look. Words matter.
Sure.
Right?
Yes, they
words
do matter. I agree.
All right. So, what are words? Words are expressions verbally of the thought, and the thought is expression of the consciousness behind it. So we do not call or summon them. We invite them with a sense of the equality that exists between all intelligent life. In other words, even if they're very different from us, they may have much higher IQs, more advanced technologically, but at the level of what Erwin Schrödinger talked about, the singularity of mind, of consciousness, and that's a universal constant. On that level, they're awake, we're awake. And so the light of awareness from my eyes, yours, and ET's, it's the same. Because they've done studies. Consciousness is, in fact, a singularity. It's not divisible.
Sure.
We divide it by our egos, right?
Yeah.
And in reality, on a higher level of understanding, it's a singularity. So that is where we come together. This is why our motto is one universe, one people. That within the universe, at that level of consciousness and mind, we're all one people. And so that's why I don't like the term alien, which means foreign, right? I like the term, people. People say, what do you call it? I saw they're non-human people, they're extraterrestrial people. Now the trick here, and this is where it gets very complicated for some people, is that a lot of people will do something like that and they'll bump into something from another dimension, right? Like an angel or a demon or whatever. But that's not extraterrestrial. So this is where you get into the show. Tucker Carlson.
Oh yeah,
he got gaslit by a lot of these intel folks who told them that the aliens are demons. Well, the reason he was gaslit was because they were preying on his valid, Christian beliefs. I'm not questioning that at all, but the sort of cosmology that is known within many traditional circles, they wanted to conflate that with alien. And it's easy to do because that is another special operations capability. And that is to use very powerful electromagnetic systems to create phenomenon like you see at Skinwalker or Bradshaw Ranch. We know how they're doing it. I know who's doing it. I know what the electronics are. Now, there's an innate phenomenon that was there, but then both sites were taken over by covert human black operations.
So this aliens and demons narrative that it seems to be everywhere, where is that coming from, and what is the purpose behind it? What is the motive of it?
It is literally to demonize non-human existence so we can have war. See, everything tracks to the fear factor, right? Everything tracks back to how do you create an enemy, right?
Right.
All right. So if you're wanting to aggrandize the military-industrial super complex on a international level, the card that has to be eventually played, which is what Werner von Braun warned about, will be this alien threat card. And so you can do it in a lot of ways. If you're talking to someone who's religious, relate it to demons. If you're talking to someone who's conventional geopolitical, they're a national security threat or air safety threat.
Right.
If you want to relate it, whatever it is, so they have scripts and narratives to sort of affect. And what they do is they do an analysis of your own psychology and belief system. Target it. So, when I was at the Vatican,
there's a flavor of PSYOP for everyone.
Yes, and it's curated. It's tailored for that.
You're at the Vatican?
And when I was at the Vatican some years ago when Pope John Paul was the Pope, I met with Monsignor Balducci. You may have heard of him. He was a senior theologian to the Pope, and very interested in this issue of the ET